me as well. Because when I was doing my PhD program, she was one of the people leading my thesis. And because she has been a lecturer for many years, so she put all the dots in the right places for me. I see that look. And I remember that the role she played was very significant, even in my master's program. When she said you get 40% in this one, if I don't do it properly, I will get 40%. So whatever I'm presenting today, I also give her credit for the support she gave me. This is a very timely topic, and this conference that is being organized is one of the most relevant conferences I've attended or to speak. And why is it so important? It is timely, and it's going to be relevant from now to eternity. Faith, food, and sustainable development. Cultivating a sacred ecology for human flourishing. I'm Festus, Olusanya, Ogunmola, popularly known as AKA Olatunde. I'm a pastor and the president of a Scottish Council of African Churches, which Professor Lugane supported in establishing before he left Edinburgh. I'm also the co-president of African Flow Center for Policy Research in Scotland. Prof was one of the people that helped us to create that center, and today it has been applauded by the United Nations and the First Minister in Scotland. I also serve as the regional overseer as the pastor for Mountain of Fire and Miracle Ministry in Edinburgh, and the vice chair of the Next Step Initiative. I'm also the founder of Cultivating Foundation and board director of eTransit, which is the financial platform that Western Union and MoneyGram is using in Africa. I direct the compliance of Exit Digital Bank. It's the first African-led digital bank in Scotland, UK. I co-founded with one of my colleagues. I'm happily married to Dr. Christiana Timmy. It's a real pleasure to be here again. Thank you very much for this opportunity. The issue of food is so important. My presentation today will look at faith and food, how it shapes human culture and social organization. We're going to look at how the global development agenda, how it affects this food and faith. And this paper will explore other intersections and the argument that religious beliefs and value which they provide as resources for addressing current food crisis, while guiding the creation of ecological, sustainable, and social just food systems. We're going to draw our attention to Christians, to Muslims, and to indigenous religions, how they aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations of 2015. So this paper is going to look at the food practices and the theological, the ethical, and the political acts. These are some of the things we are going to consider. How faith and food, for you to know that they are moral, they are spiritual, and they have ecological foundations for human flourishing. So how can the community transform food system for justice and sustainability? Today, there are global food crises. Last week, we had Professor Joe Gobert, a Jewish rabbi. He visited me in my church and he addressed the congregation. He's a very close friend to King Charles. And he said one of the concerns of King Charles in their recent meeting is that about 25,000 children in Scotland, they go to bed every night without food. And that is really very touching to the king and to himself. Today, we have about 7.5 million people who face hunger, as reported by the Food and Agri Organizations of the United Nations in 2023. And nearly 30% of the global population, they face food insecurity. Industrial culture They drive emissions, deforestation, and inequality. They are adding to part of the problem, even though they create some economic profit for themselves on one hand, but there are some other losses that comes through that. This I describe as a crisis, not only of production, but of purpose. Faith can serve as a resource for transformation. Religious traditions, they offer moral and cosmological frameworks. In Christendom, stewardship and justice is one that we can know. When we look at what was written in the book of Genesis 2, there are some guidelines we see there. When the book of Genesis 2 says, the Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to walk it and to watch over it. Land help us to produce this food. Mm-hmm. And there is a stewardship and justice surrounding it. In the book of Matthew 25:35 again, you see that he said, for I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. The issue of food is very important. Mm-hmm. I noticed something recent. I realized a sudden increase in the membership of our church. For the past 20 years, when we set up that church, when we go for evangelism, we give them tracts. They will collect the tract and share it. Mm-hmm. I was wondering why, what is happening? Now we now introduce food evangelism. Food bank. Those who don't come to the church before, they will come, they will sit down. Wow. They are watching because food is coming. We kept the food they are going to give them after the service. So as they are looking at the food. As they are listening, they are looking at the food. So they will wait patiently till the end of the service. And when the service ends, they will say, this is a wonderful service. What is wonderful is because the food they are taking home. Mm-hmm. And when they go home, you ask them, how was the service today? Oh, they gave us good food. Mm-hmm. Now, and I saw that the news was going around. They tell the other friends, they will come. The first Sunday of every month is our Thanksgiving Day. Mm-hmm. Every place we eat, we carry food home. Mm-hmm. So this has become a food evangelism which has really helped us. Wow. Sure. Now, let's look at this concept. In the Islamic world, they believe in moderation, generosity, and stewardship, as written in the Caliphate. The indigenous cosmologists, they believe in reciprocity and sacred relationship with land. Food has that connections, which we are going to look at. There's a concept that I want us to understand today, which is the concept of sacred ecology. The sacred ecology is a theological ethical paradigm where sustainability, equity, and reference for creation are intertwined. They are linked together. I will give you a brief explanation of what I mean by that. The theological and ethical framework of sacred ecology, it operationalizes sacred ecology, which requires translating its theological vision into practical and ethical commitment. There is a fourfold theological ethical framework that guides the faith communities, policymakers, and educators, as written by Wisber 2011 and White 2013. We are going to look at that one, the four pillars of gratitude and reference, of justice and equity, of sufficiency and modernization, and community and care. Now, the concept of sacred ecology is very important. Food, as theological, ethical, and political act, it integrates the sustainable development goals within spiritual values. So what are these theological and scriptural foundations? God told them to till and keep the garden. The land produces this food. And in Leviticus 45, land rest for distribution. Land must be honored to rest. And Quran also has allowed the same thing. Now, the indigenous teachings is talking about gratitude, harmony, and reciprocity. Under the gender justice and decolonial perspective, women are very central to food systems, but they face inequity. I remember my wife was invited to speak in one of the programs. She set up Widowhood Center in Plateau State when she was the Commissioner for Women Affairs in that state. And the role the women played in bringing food to the community is enormous. So the issue of gender justice and the colonial perspective is very important. I won't go too far into that one because of time. Now, the issue of faith-based innovations. There are some innovations that churches, mosques, other religions can bring into bear. The Green Ramadan Indonesia is an example. The Echo Congregation Scotland, whereby a charity brings churches together to look at the climatic factor that can affect the land. The African Initiative Churches and Sustainable Agriculture, which Professor Ralph mentioned yesterday. Some of the things that African Initiative Churches can do, even though we have not got there, a lot of work still has to be done. We have to move away from preaching, fasting, casting, and going to the field to practice the real farming, to do the real work and produce the real food. You can imagine churches, big churches, if they can have fun, we can feed the whole nation. The interfaith and youth leadership is very important. The youth has a lot of role to play. I give power to the youth in my church, and I marvel at the level of innovations, the creativity, the ideas they are bringing in. In the area of food, we can employ this youth. They have a lot of role to play. The fourfold framework that we need to understand: gratitude, reverence, recognize food as sacred, justice and equity, fair access and advocacy, sufficiency and moderation, community and care shared. On the basis of food, I noticed that there's a policy we use in the banking industry, and it works. We call it TCL approach with food. Customers, events, when you give food to somebody who's in need, you show tenderness. And when you give tenderness, when you show tenderness to people, you gain their trust. On the seaside, if you show care, the food, through food, you show care for people. When you give care, you gain their confidence. On the food side, if you give food to people, you are showing love. With that love, you gain their loyalty. So the TCL does not go in vain. What you give, you get it back. On the policy and recommendations, I remember what Professor Leslie Adogame said just now, before the division, before we separated the different parts. Dr. Leslie Adogame. You also become a professor of medicine, don't worry. It's a promotion for you. When you go to St. Andrews is one of the Ivy Leagues in Scotland. So it's a product of Cambridge, we call it the Cambridge of Scotland. So it's a promotion for you, thank you. Now, in conclusion, because time is fast spent, faith communities can face the hungry. They can feed the hungry. We can heal the earth. They can sustain the sacred. This is both a spiritual and practical mission to restore balance, justice, and hope. Adogame 2025, there was something he put which was really, really very important, which I don't want us to go without understanding it. He made a reference to something that is very key to my heart. And when he was making that reference, I think you need to understand it. He said faith-based diplomacy often succeeds where secular advocate struggles because it engages moral conscience rather than political expedience. Adogame 2025. Thank you very much.